everybody, welcome to Popcorn Planet. I'm Andy Signor, and Chris Terrio, the screenwriter of Rise of Skywalker, is back in the news doing more interviews. I don't know why. He's attempting to defend his work on Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker, and it's just coming across as a little defensive and strange. I don't know why he is out there right now. JJ and he should just take a break, let film people watch it. Maybe down the line in the next film he can make some comments, but I don't see how this is helping. And it's just odd. The screenwriter isn't out there making quotes for the Hollywood Reporter, and obviously it's a slow news week with the holidays and stuff. But I wanted to go through some of these points because he offers a lot of insight on sort of justifying things. But really, the headline for this article and the biggest story here is sort of him trying to set the record straight on Perceived Last Jedi Jabs. There's that scene where Luke, the Jedi's weapon deserves more respect, which really does seem like a middle finger to Rian Johnson. But as I said, it seemed like the perfect thing that was a jab at Rian Johnson for the fans who don't like Rian Johnson. And it was sort of a thing that you could justify. Oh, no, Luke would say that. So it wasn't a jab at Rian Johnson. It was a perfect passive-aggressive jab that really could go either way. So I actually thought it was kind of smart. Because I just could tell JJ would, of course, defend and say, oh, no, that wasn't a knock on him. See, Luke's changed. He's making a jab at himself. But I still think that was a jab at Rian Johnson, The Last Jedi. But let's hear what Chris Terrio says about that, as well as just sort of his involvement in the film and some more insight behind the Rise of Skywalker. So let's get through. We're gonna skim through some of these parts together so I can then share you some of my feedback. But first up, they talked about sort of how long did he have to reclimate himself with all things Star Wars. It says he had a couple months just to spend in research. He knew the original trilogy really well, but at the time he didn't know the prequel trilogy as well. Surprise, surprise, not many people want to rewatch those. So I had to catch up pretty fast. I also wanted to get more familiar with the extended universe. Interesting. As TV shows, novels, in order to try and understand the landscape of the galaxy in a way that only the most hardcore fans would understand it. So he had a 2-month crash course to sort of try and gather things. And so they had a tight schedule, yada, yada, yada. What was the first story point that you feverishly pitched, JJ? I really wanted to see Rey, Poe, and Finn together. I was really eager to see how they would play off each other. Yeah, interesting. 3 movies and they hadn't really played off each other. That was one thing I really looked forward to after seeing Episode 7. And then, of course, the story of Episode 8, by necessity, kept them apart. Didn't need to. Finn's journey was stupid. Poe's journey was stupid. And Rey spends the whole movie on a planet. Really didn't need to do that. So I was eager to have the friends together and have them go on a classic adventure together. Rey had already gone through her middle act, which was to be alone with herself, really, and with Luke, but really alone with her thoughts on the island. Poe had already gone through hints of his first crisis of leadership with Leia, and Finn went off on a different adventure of his own. That's a fair way to say it. Finn went off on a different adventure of his own that we won't ever talk about again because it was completely stupid. I hope Rian Johnson understands that. It's like, look, there's a lot of unfair criticism of Last Jedi, but Finn's story in Episode 8 is just, there's no other word for it but filler. There's no learning. There was no need for it. It was, let's introduce Rose, and they'll both learn that gambling and rich people are bad. No point. There's no point to it. So we thought we'd have the 3 main characters act together was important. Rey Palpatine. What were the ins and outs of that significant choice? Well, we thought Rey's arc cannot be finished after Episode 8. Well, duh. You can't leave Episode 8 and say, well, now Rey is content. She's discovered her parents aren't Skywalkers or whatever, and that's fine. But so much of her personal story was about where she came from, what kept her on Jakku all these years, and the trauma that shaped her. Who was content at the end of 8 with Rey? Like, Rey was almost worse off at the end of 8. You're a nobody. Nothing. You mean nothing. We see quite strongly in 7 that something mysterious and troubling happened to her. Although she did get some, again, we see in 7, again, this is retconning. He's trying to say they don't retcon it through this whole article, but keep your eyes peeled. It's clearly what's happening. He's trying to not say it out of respect to Rian Johnson and being a professional. But guys, it's clear you retconned it. Because you're saying what you see in the film, and we couldn't do it because of this film. That's adjusting it. That's admitting that you didn't like an 8, so you wanted to go back to what you did in 7. So you're retconning it. Just admit it. Why can't they admit it? We felt that there were more questions in Rey's head about where she came from. And so we had to address that in the film. Ryan's answer to what was the worst news that Rey could receive was that she came from junk traders. And that's true. She does come from junk traders. We didn't contradict that. But when JJ and I spoke, he said, well, what's even worse, answer or elaboration of that news? What's even worse than she came from junk traders? Well, we thought the worst answer was that she descended from the family who are the enemies of her new family. Her new family? Luke's not her family at the episode end of 8? What? She's annoyed. There's no family to that. She hugs Leia a couple times. There's the only moments happen in the year between where apparently her and Leia got closer, and then she didn't even see Luke that whole time. But apparently they're her family now. That's how they see this. That's why I'm annoyed with this movie. They're not family. They aren't family. Leia's a mother figure to Rey in a way that no one has ever seen since she lost her real mother. So the idea that Rey has had inclinations towards the dark side would learn in the course of the movie that Leia is training the descendant of her greatest enemy and that she has the force strength of Leia's greatest enemy. What were the inclinations? When did we see dark side inclinations in 7 or 8? There were hardly any. There was nothing. She saves Kylo Ren. She goes after Snoke. She doesn't show any evil. Nothing started until 9. It's frustrating. Retconned. I don't even have a problem with the story beats, but you did retcon and you rushed it. Sorry. Staying on point, discovering that you actually descended from your adoptive family. They're adding these words. They're just trying to no. Rey is now the adoptive daughter of Luke and Leia, who are brother and sister. They're not even. Discovering you're actually descended from your adoptive family's greatest enemy. How did she know? How would she know that right away? She would. This is just so. The same enemy who corrupted Anakin Skywalker, a person she doesn't know, and responsible for the destruction of the Skywalker family in the first place, felt more devastating to us. No, Kylo Ren causes more. He kills Han. Based on that, we were very moved by the idea that Leia would have known that from the very beginning. Apparently, which we wouldn't known, but she did because Luke says it. But since exposition, Luke told us that of course she knew. Bet you she didn't know. She didn't know when they were filming 7 and 8. Carrie Fisher. Rey, she decided that she was going to take a chance of putting all the hope in the galaxy into the hands of a descendant of her greatest enemy. Leia did this. Leia knew all along, guys, that she's the key. She's Palpatine's granddaughter. Doesn't matter. She's got some force in her. She's important. As Luke says, some things are stronger than blood. That felt like it was a really strong story point to us. Ugh. Therefore, at the end of the movie, when she declares herself a Skywalker, that felt like the end of the conversation, which is to say that you get to choose your family and you really get to choose your ancestry. Rey rejects the blood ancestry that she's inherited and instead chooses the ancestry of the Jedi. Okay. I get it. It doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it cheesy and forced. We are your. By the end, they say, "We are your ancestors now." In the background, during that scene of Rise, "We are your ancestors now." Oh, that's. I think that's true. She chooses the spiritual ancestry of the Jedi instead of the blood ancestry of Palpatine. But she did that the whole movie. She never had a change. She never actually had that arc where she actually went dark, which would have been interesting. She didn't have the arc that Kylo Ren did. She didn't. She had no challenges thrown her way except for she was told she was nobody, and then she was told she was the granddaughter of a very bad person. Those are her downfalls. That's it. Those are the challenges she had to overcome. And then she just forces them for a way out of them. Many fans, myself included, appreciated how The Last Jedi democratized the Force. While I understand the choice to connect Rey to a notable bloodline, again, reporter being nice, does your film still recognize the existence of the galaxy's broom boys and girls, Force users without famous ancestry? This was a very nice, polite way to ask. Kind of just sort of threw all that away. And he goes, of course. Hopefully the film also suggests that Finn is discovering that he is a Force user. Finn feels the death of Rey. How convenient. Everyone in this world is Force sensitive now. Finn senses the command ship, we get it, blah, 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 blah. So considering that the story was about the Palpatines and the story, let me go back. Luke does say explicitly in Return of the Jedi that the Force is strong in my family. We know that there is an inherited element of Force power, so considering that this was a story of the Palpatines and Skywalkers, at least in these 9 movies, we decided to focus on the family part. Rey descending from a Palpatine doesn't negate the idea that kids with brooms, Finn and any other number of people in the galaxy, can be strong with the Force. It just so happens that this young girl that we found in episode 7, which really has the structure of a fairy tale, is royalty of the dark side. Now, here's where I'm just frustrated. I like this idea, but you didn't introduce that until the end, and then you rushed through it. That's why the film doesn't work as well. I'm not going to say it's a failure. I'm not going to say it's bad. It just doesn't work as well as it could have because you didn't introduce this sooner, and no one did. And then you tried to retcon it, and then you, well, no, see, it was all justified. But 7 and 8 don't justify this. 7 and 8 don't justify the fact that she struggled with the dark side. They don't. Kylo Ren had that problem. And he was Skywalker blood. He had no Palpatine in him. So what shouldn't it have been reversed? Shouldn't have Rey had the visions and gone dark? Because that's why they were talking to him, but not her? Why? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not trying to be mad. I'm just frustrated. Tell me in the comments below. Hit me up on social media. Why does it make sense that Palpatine was going after Kylo Ren and not Rey? Like, why? What? Tell me. Explain it to me. I don't understand. All this justification is only making me more confused. Okay, anyway, we couldn't agree with the debate about the democracy. So this idea of royalty, sorry, I jumped ahead, but I shouldn't because this is important. What we discover in this movie, and hopefully in retrospect, is that she's essentially a princess who's been raised as an orphan. The idea that this royalty of the dark side would be found as a scavenger in the middle of nowhere, literally living off the ruins of the old war that was created by her ancestors, felt really strong to us. We couldn't agree more with the debate about the democratization of the Force, but for purposes of the story, we thought that it was a more interesting and mythic answer if it turned out that Rey descended from one of the families that has been the center of this whole saga the whole time. Did you notice that? We couldn't agree more with the debate about the democratization of the Force, but for purposes of this story, we thought it was a more interesting and mythic answer if it turned out this. They are retconning it. They are saying, we decided that this was better than what Rian Johnson did. He just said it. He just said it even though he's trying to say he's not doing that. He did. It turned out that Rey descended from the families that had been the center of this whole saga this entire time. In the end, the film asserts that there are things stronger than blood because she chooses different family. And then we talk about is Finn force sensitive? And of course, Finn can feel it. When Luke appeared on, here we go. This is the main point. When Luke appeared on Crate in The Last Jedi, he apologized to Leia for turning his back on the fight. He basically admitted that the guy who tossed the lightsaber aside to Echoes 2 was wrong before, sacrificing his life to save the Resistance and spread hope throughout the galaxy. However, I've already noticed that people are projecting the notion that Luke's line, "A Jedi's weapon deserves much more respect." Was that a swipe at Rian Johnson's first act choice to have him throw away the weapon right away? However, I thought you were reaffirming the very conclusion that Rian arrived at Luke. So the reporter's being nice, saying, well, he wasn't disrespecting it. Luke's clearly changed, judging by the script you wrote. And then Chris goes, that's exactly it. Those people who see it as a meta argument between JJ and Rian are missing the point, I think. At the end of The Last Jedi, Luke has changed. When people look at that, I feel that they misread the ending of The Last Jedi. Throughout The Last Jedi, Luke is stuck, just as so many other characters in Empire Strikes Back were stuck. The Falcon's hyperdrive is literally stuck. Last Jedi is a really strong middle act because it seems like everyone is spinning their wheels and stuck in certain ways, just as they are in Empire Strikes Back. I mean that in the sense of everyone is trying to move forward, but as in any middle act, they can't quite get there yet. When Luke says a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect, in Episode 9, that's Luke speaking. That's his own character. He's making fun of himself. He's saying to Rey, please don't make the same mistake that I did. That's another theme of the film. How do we learn from our ancestors? How do we learn from our parents? How do we learn from the previous generation? How do we learn from all the good things that they did to not repeat their mistakes? In that movement, it truly is a character moment because we quite deliberately set up the same situation of tossing a saber, but this time Luke is there to save Rey from making a bad choice. I think it would be a bad misreading to think that was somehow me or JJ having an argument with Rian. It was more like we are in a dialogue with Rian by using what Luke did at the beginning of Last Jedi to now say that history will not repeat itself with all these characters have grown. Now look, fair. That's what I said. It's written in a way because Luke's then statement is like, no, I was wrong. But you wrote that he was wrong. Rian Johnson didn't write he was wrong. You wrote he was wrong. So by doing that whole scene and the acknowledging not to throw away, no matter what you mean, it is a subtle passive-aggressive dig at what choices Luke made at the end of Last Jedi. We don't know where he is. You're deciding to say where he is. You're deciding to say it was all changed. I don't know if I got that. You're telling me the interpretation at the end of Last Jedi. I don't know if I got that. I think he was more worried about Kylo Ren than Rey. And he made some mistakes. I do believe he's changed, but I don't know. I don't know if I believe Luke's turn just by the end of Last Jedi. You are telling me his turn by exposition scenes, which aren't that effective for me. So It's exactly what I've been saying it is. It's a passive-aggressive shot at Rian Johnson, absolutely, that then they can defend isn't because Luke says it's not. I've changed, that's why. And so it's this weird middle ground that I think, sure, you can take it however you will. I take it as I think they totally purposely did that because they knew fans were divided and they knew that was the perfect sort of springboard to go either way. If you don't like Last Jedi, here, we are telling you we don't like The Last Jedi either. That's how we're doing it. We can't come out and say we don't like The Last Jedi, but guys, we didn't like The Last Jedi. Clearly, we're retconning everything we can. We're going to say we're not retconning it, but we did retcon it. There's a lot more in this interview I want to break down, but I don't want to get too disfocused on that. Let's keep it on this topic. I'll do more later. You can check out the whole article, and I'll bring out some more pieces of this later. But what did you think? Do you think this was a knock? Do you think that they're trying to retcon? There's so much more pieces you can learn and get from out of this, but I don't want to sit here and read a script to you. A whole interview, you can read it yourself. My main point is when you read even just the beginning as we get of what we went through, you can read that they are not happy with where Rian Johnson went. They weren't. They made creative choices that were different than Rian Johnson because they preferred their story of the bloodline of Rey. They preferred the story of Luke, doing being more the way we wanted him to be and not stuck like he was in part 2. They've justified this new narrative to explain the being stuck, and that's really where things I think are screwing us up in the head because I don't necessarily buy that. I just don't. The biggest problem still, and will remain, is the fact that part 2, you can say was a middle ground where people were stuck and it was important and all that stuff, but it wasn't advancing the plot in a direction that actually helped your finale. And you had so much you wanted to tell in your finale that we have to go by the movie Force Awakens and then The Last Jedi and then The Rise of Skywalker. And the problem is, and I don't think it's JJ's fault. The only way you could say it's JJ's fault is because he should have directed part 2. But it's not JJ's fault because Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger, Disney decided to let Rian Johnson take the reins and go in the direction he went. And then they got cold feet and they said, no, JJ, come back. Colin Trevorrow was clearly going to do his own next thing. And they're like, no. You know what? Force Awakens, hey, JJ, come back. That was the mistake. They went backwards. Instead of just finding someone who could just say, fine, I'm accepting what Rian Johnson did. I'm going to find a way to move forward. They went backwards. And that was the problem. They just went backwards. And then, yes, you can do that from a story point, and some people liked it. But what I guess that's the best way I can sort of explain my frustration of this entire trilogy and why I don't think it works, because there's no cohesive vision throughout the 3 of them. There's one person who had a vision. There's one person who sort of just dared to change that vision. And then it goes back to the first person who goes, well, no, there was my vision, remember? And now as a rule of 3, they don't work together. They're rushed. They're different disjointed voices. You can just tell by everybody who's involved in the film. So look, I appreciate anybody who likes the film. I wish I would have liked the film, but I don't buy it. I do think that scene specifically where Luke says you must respect a Jedi's weapon was a complete knock at Last Jedi. I don't think it was done viciously or maliciously. I just think it was a clear oh, perfect. The fans who didn't like it will think this is funny. And we can justify why it's there because it's Luke changing. It's Luke making fun of himself. Right, guys? Cool. That's a good roast joke that we can do. We would do that all the time in Honest Trailers, where I would be like, look, I don't want to bash this actor or the studio, but this is a clever, honest way to do it, where we have a safety net of saying, well, no, we're making fun of that. It's what a smart writer does. I don't buy that they aren't stupid enough. They aren't stupid people. They had to know when they wrote that line that people were going to take it that way. These guys are too smart. They knew that going in, and they chose to keep it. And I don't have a problem with it. They just own it is what I have a problem with. Don't retcon this now and say, well, no, it's because of that. Just admit, yeah, look, we know the movie was divisive. That line was a perfect way to attract both people. We could justify it, and people who didn't like it, they could feel like, well, see, we're listening. That, to me, is the honest answer. What do you think? Am I being crazy? Hit me down below in the comments or up on social media. Lots more to digest as Star Wars unfolds. I'm sure we'll be hearing lots of excuses from a lot of people involved in the film. But thank you so much for watching. Leave your thoughts here. May the Force be with us, and enjoy your Happy New Year's tonight. Thanks, everybody. Bye.